Dear friends, you're with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And I want to follow on something that we started talking about in another podcast that you can look for, you can follow. If you haven't, please do that and also review this one. The first one is very important, and this one I think it's even more important. What are we talking about? We're talking about a problem that concerns us, unfortunately, to the vast majority of us, which is overweight and obesity. Now, I really want to insist in the following fact. It's not that I love to see everybody thin, etc. We're not talking about cosmetics. We're not talking about looks. We're not talking about that. If it were not because overweight and obesity can lead to a lot of deadly diseases like heart disease, strokes, diabetes, hypertension, etc., we wouldn't be sitting here in a health-oriented program discussing it. We would discuss it in a fashion program, not in this type of setting. But why are we talking about obesity? Because it has grown in staggering numbers. We have more and more people, more than ever, with this problem, which is leading to other diseases. And these other diseases, which are chronic inflammatory diseases, are deadly. They actually kill 7 out of every 10 Americans. So if you're in a group of 10, 7 out of the whole group are going to die because of one of these chronic illnesses. So the foundation of all these things is overweight and obesity. We start having problems when we start gaining weight. So it is not good news by any means. That's one side which is very important in this problem. Now let me go to the other problem, to the other part of the equation. I'm going to talk about you. I'm going to talk about everything you have gone through if you are overweight, if you are obese. I'm going to talk about you. Because both people around you and the medical world have made you responsible, have finger pointed at you as the culprit, as the problem. The verdict is very clear. You are guilty. You are gaining weight because you want. That's the first thing. Because of a choice. You choose to be fat. Second, you are getting a problem with weight because of 2 major things. You eat too much. You eat too frequently. You eat all the time. And the other one, because you don't exercise. You don't move. You don't do what you should do. You don't run, you don't jog, you don't have a jogging shoes, etc. So you're guilty of 2 things: eating too much and doing nothing physically speaking. You do not get active, etc. So on top of everything you're going through, now you have another new problem. Guilt. And you probably have lived through it. You probably will agree with everything I'm saying when I say that people not only finger point at you, but you feel you're doing a lot. You feel you try. You feel you have gone on this diet and you have gone on the other diet. And diet 1, diet 2, diet 3, all of them are going to fail. And all of them are going to fail for one simple reason. Because you're not facing just an eating disorder, you're not just facing laziness, you're not just, not even a genetic problem. You are facing a disease. I have talked to so many people with this problem throughout my life. And I see them. And they try to be as good as they can. But there's something that overcomes their will. There's something that, in spite of their will, doesn't work. How many of you have been on a diet, kept it, done it well, exercise, and you start losing weight, and all of a sudden you get to that dreaded plateau, you don't lose any more weight, and after a little while you start gaining weight again. So these are two truths that people with overweight has to face. One, actually every diet can work. All of them are going to get you to lose weight, at least temporarily, in the beginning. But the other one is that all of them fail. Eventually, you're going to plateau first and then start gaining weight again. And in the other podcast, we're talking about some of the conditions that put you in that situation. And one of the big problems is that we started eating as we used to eat. Not only we do not eat the same way, but the products that we can buy are not what they used to be. And that has given us a lot of problems. And I say we, everybody, people with overweight and people that are not overweight, we all have been a victim of processed food. And I want to talk a little bit about that because processed food has been the culprit of a lot of the things that we're saying. We cannot be healthy. We will never reach health if we are eating products that are not really fit for a healthy human. It's a simple equation. You have a healthy human, you have bad food, big problem. You have a very nice car, pure fuel, poor lubrication, it's going to fail. Same with us. We are the victims of an idea that started about 1970 that told us that we were getting a lot of heart attacks because we ate too much fat. And with that, we did two things. We reduced fat in our diets, and we started filling that vacuum, that emptiness, with carbohydrates, which is sugars and starches, and processing food. Because if we process food, we could make it a lot palatable. And all you wanted to hear is that that food is cholesterol-free, is fat-free, is low-fat, etc., etc. That made us happy. And I was a doctor already in 1970. I remember distinctly when we started telling people, don't eat this, don't eat fat, don't eat lard, don't eat butter, don't eat eggs, because they have cholesterol. That was part of the medical everyday conversation. We, the doctors, told you to do things that in the long run turned out to be a disgrace for humans. So if we begin to understand what has happened, and we can understand how these things have managed to distort a lot of metabolic conditions in the body, then we will begin to understand how we can untangle these things, how we can go back, how we can replan our lives, how we can create a new strategy and be healthier. And again, healthier not necessarily means to be slim. Let me give you a good idea. Sumo wrestlers, they're huge, but they do not have any metabolic problem. Why? Because they have the right kind of fat in the right kind of places. But we, the vast majority of us, have all this abdominal, peripheral fat around our waistline and in our abdominal cavity, which is not a very good fat because it has a lot of hormonal activity. And it can create a lot of problems for us. It's going to be inflammatory. It's going to give us a lot of problems. It's going to create insulin resistance, and it's going to produce disease. That's the type of fat that the vast majority of us have. It's not good fat just because we exercise. If you go to the northern part of our continent and you go to the Inuit communities, the Eskimos, they eat fat, period. No ifs and buts. They take a piece of fat from the whale and they eat it, or from any other animal, and they eat it. And they don't have heart attacks. They don't have any of the problems that we have. They're not obese. Okay, they might be bigger people because they're very strong. They have a huge muscular mass, but they're not sick. They don't share the illnesses that we have. So that tells me that if I analyze what's happening to people that are healthier than us, we can start understanding what is happening to us. If I can understand that, I'll be able to make the changes I have to do to get my health back and to get control of my life. You will never be able to do it if you don't do what you have to do. It's like asking a drug addict just to have a lot of willpower. Some might, but the majority of them will not. The same happens here. You have found some exceptional individuals that decided to get over the problem. They started doing something, they continue doing something, and they somehow managed to click the right elements just to become healthier and healthier. But that's the exception. But the most important part of this message right now is you are not guilty of anything. You are the victim. And we're going to tell you how to untangle the things, go back, and get healthy. So don't go away, stay tuned, and ask your friends to join you. I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And today we're talking about the culprit of overweight and obesity. And I have given you a brief summary of the problem of understanding overweight and obesity. And very importantly, to understand that we are not just lazy and big eaters, but we are victim of a big problem with the food supply that we have. Said that, I want to state two important things. One, the beginning of overweight and obesity is hormonal. You guessed it. Because many of my patients come to me and they, in desperation, because they tried and failed, and they don't seem to find an answer. They say, doctor, there must be something. There must be something hormonal. What about my thyroid? And all of them tend to go to the thyroid gland. And you check the thyroid, and the thyroid gland is perfectly normal, which is to be known. Because for a person to get obese because of low thyroid function, the hypothyroidism has to be so blatant that you don't even need a doctor to do the diagnosis. So it's not like you're gaining weight because you are having a little bit of a problem. No, it's you have to have with blatant hypothyroidism to create a real weight problem. Because most of what you see in low thyroid function is swelling. It's edema. That's what you see in people. So that you see them a little bit rounded, you see them swollen, but this is fluid. It's not fat. So no, that's not the answer. So yes, it is hormonal. Second, what is the hormone that's giving us the problem? It's insulin. And I want you to get that word very clearly. And I want you to put it in your head, and I want you to understand it. Because everything we're going to say from now on, everything that we're going to see how we can remedy, how we can change this for the better, has to do with insulin levels. If we don't get that part, we're going to try and fail forever, as we have for the last 50, 60, 70 years. So we have to start. And I'm saying 70 years because if you go back only to before the 1970s, we didn't have this problem. So this is new. This is completely new. I'm going to repeat it. I was already a doctor. I have more than 50 years as a doctor. Well, I was already a doctor when I saw all these food changes happening. And from then on, it's been uphill. Every day more sick people, every day more problems, every day more desperate people that don't know where this is coming from. And we, the doctors, are the first one that didn't have the full understanding of what was happening. Well, back around those years, something happened in the horizon that has been very good for this problem, which is the discovery on how to measure certain hormones that are in circulation in very tiny little amounts. When you check your glucose in blood, you say, I have so many milligrams, which is 1,000th of a gram. You say, I have 100 milligrams. That's 1/10 of a gram. You can really figure out how much is that. But then when everything is very minuscule, you go to smaller and smaller amount, and then you get to a point where you get to nanograms. And that's a millionth of a gram. So we couldn't measure it. There was no way. There was no chemical procedure that could tell us you have so many of this thing. And that was particularly true for hormones. We couldn't measure cortisol. We couldn't measure many of these sexual hormones. We couldn't measure insulin, for one. But then there was a fantastic discovery of something called radioimmunoassay, which is a very fancy procedure by which you can tell how much of this substance you have, even though it's in minuscule amounts. And then we started measuring insulin. And then we discovered that a lot of people with this problem have a high insulin level. Now, simple explanation. You eat a sugar, insulin comes in, takes care of it, everything is back to normal. Fantastic. Well, what we didn't say is that if you have a product that raises sugar in a very sharp way, it will demand a very sharp elevation of insulin, which is going to get rid of all of this sugar in a very fast way. And that produces what? Hunger. Because all the energy disappears from the bloodstream and you feel hungry. Because fat, the fat that we don't like, the one that's around our waistline and so on, will, as soon as you have insulin, will take a lot of that sugar in to create fat, and again leaves the rest of the body with lower sugar levels. What is the end result? You get hungry again. And we started falling into this vicious cycle in which we were eating, feeling hungry, eating, feeling hungry, and so on. But that was because we were producing carbohydrate spikes. We had a very high elevation of sugar in the blood. And that demanded a lot of insulin. But we ate so much because we were always hungry that there was a point where the tissues started saying, stop, no more, I don't need more sugar. And that created insulin resistance. Insulin comes in, but you don't pay attention, you block the insulin activity. So what does the body do? It produces more insulin. So you have a high insulin level that goes and comes, goes and comes. These waves of spikes of insulin. But then, after a while, you get insulin resistance. So you have to produce even more insulin, which creates even more resistance. So there you created a monster. Because you're going to be hungry all the time, you're going to be producing loads and loads of fat, and you have nowhere to go. You're very hungry. What are you going to do? And you follow me, you understand me. You know that you ate something and all of a sudden you're very hungry. You never seem to reach satisfaction. Why? Because we're eating refined sugars that produce a very high spike. Refined flour. You know how flour is made today? Oh, it is made with wonderful and very sophisticated machinery that produces a very dust type of powder. It's very, very fine. So absorption is very fast. And that creates a spike. Not only that, but the carbohydrate, in order to be able to produce this sort of flour, they get stripped of the bran, of the protein, of the fat, of everything it can have except the starch. And fiber is the biggest protector, the biggest tool you can have to protect you from high carbohydrates. Seems that somebody knew very well that if you're eating wheat, if you're eating a grain, if you're eating any of these things, it has to have a bran, it has to have some protein, it has to have some fat. It was a perfect food that we managed to manipulate and create something that is bad. Not only that, again, 1960s, we were having a worry about if we were going to be able to produce enough wheat. And a brilliant scientist started crossing different types of wheat. Some very simple, short wheats with a new kind with big producers of wheat. The problem is that the big producers would bend and be ruined. And the short one produced very little grains. So he worked with the two and created a short version that could stand very well the wind, the rain, the everything, and still contain this huge amount of seeds. That was called the Green Revolution. And this man was given the Peace Nobel Prize. But then, you know, scientists cannot just sit back and enjoy. No, they thought, well, what if we manipulate it now? Not by crisscrossing plants with plants, but now I'm going to manipulate the genes of the plant so it can resist fungi, droughts, shelf life, etc. So we can make more money with it. And they created transgenic type of seeds. And you know what? They're filled with gluten. They're not the normal type of wheat. And you see people responding very badly to all these foods. No wonder they were created in a laboratory. They're Frankenstein. They're not food. They're not God-given food. They were created by the food industry to what? To produce a lot of product that lasts long, that's cheaper to produce, etc., etc., etc. You know the end. So we can make more money. That's where we stand today. So all these foods were giving us one big problem. And what was? Higher levels of insulin, insulin resistance, and all this tremendous activity of insulin that in many people ended up in the pancreas just giving up and creating diabetes type 2. As we saw the numbers in terms of weight, we saw the numbers of diabetes type 2 going up in the same way, hand in hand. We were creating now sick people. We are creating now people that do not like themselves. We were creating people that were not healthy. And the worst part, we were blaming them for the problems and for the drama and for the medical expenses and loss of capacity that these people were going through. We create a problem and we blame it on you. Don't go anywhere. Let's keep on talking. Dear friends, I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And I'm getting to you trying to talk about something that is possibly one of the biggest scams that we humans have gone through in a long time. Basically, we are seeing for the last 70 years about a tremendous rise in deadly diseases. All this tremendous rise was tied to a change, a very important change in the way we eat. And that change was produced because we were looking back in the years 1950s, 1940s, a lot of people dying of heart disease. It reached epidemic proportions. So we are very, I don't know how to call it, we think we can do it all. So our scientific world decided, oh, we can fix this. We're going to see why we're seeing so many heart attacks. And they decided that after looking at numbers and looking at things and so forth, they started to find problems in the American diet. And the problem got worse and more complicated because it reached the United States Senate, and there was a select committee to review all this. I mean, politicians reviewing what we eat and what we should eat. And of course, when you say politicians, you talk about lobbying, and somehow sugar came out untouched. The culprit was fat. And they created the infamous food pyramid in which fats were vilified and carbs were, brought to the upper level because they didn't have any fat. So that created the problem that we're living with today. We dropped fats, we started eating a lot of carbohydrates, and of course the food industry saw that as a huge opportunity. You take all your carbs, your cereals, your rice, your corn, your everything, and you start producing food that people can eat, but people are not really happy to eat just cereal. So what they do? Well, you sweeten it. And originally you use some sugar, but then you start using high fructose. And high fructose is a natural product with a very low glycemic index. It should be a fantastic thing. But it has a very important metabolic problem. Whereas sugars and glucose can be used by any cell in the body, fructose can only be used by the liver. So whatever amount of fructose you eat, your liver is stuck with it. It has to deal with it. Nothing else in the body can help. And that started creating one of the big problems that should be brought to our attention. We actually have a podcast about it, which is the infiltration of fat in the liver, or fatty liver. That started becoming a real common problem in the American people. That in itself should be telling us that we're doing something wrong. But the amount, you might say, doctor, and I get this question all the time. I have somebody that just asked me, well, then if you eat, let's say, watermelon, doesn't it have fructose? Yes. What's the difference? The amount. It's a matter of level. Fruits have fructose. That's where the name comes from. But they have so minor amounts that, chemically speaking, they're really hard to measure. But the fructose is so powerful as a sweetener that you can put a little bit on it and sweeten gallons and gallons and gallons of soda drinks. And then we start drinking sodas, and we start drinking sweetened foods, and sweeten everything. Because the other big problem, or I don't know if it's a problem or not, is that fructose is very cheap. So you can put it in everything, in any amount. It wouldn't affect your profit margin. Quite the contrary, it can help it because you're selling more and more. And soda drinks, and cakes, and pastries, and ice cream, and you name it, became staple food. We were not eating any more bread and butter. We were buying sweetened food. And we started feeding our children fructose for breakfast. And we started using cereals that have been physically managed so they're fluffy and popped out, etc., etc. And those things change the glycemic index of the cereal. So you had two problems. A cereal with a high level of glycemic index, and the other one, we had fructose in it. If that's not enough, think again about your breakfast cereal. It has coloring and flavoring and, of course, preservatives, chemical substances, so it can last very long time in your pantry or at the store. So put it all together and ask yourself a question. Can this be healthy? Of course not. It is not healthy. But that's the way we started eating in America from those years on. Not only that, but you could see the ads on TV. They were directed to children, to toddlers. Show them the little things with a lot of colors, with a lot of little gifts, a lot of everything. They were being pushed, literally, as in drug addicts, into eating things that were not healthy for them. And I remember it very clearly, even up to today. I mean, ask people how you eat, and they say, "Doctor, I'm very health conscious." For example, for my breakfast, I always have a bowl of cereal. So we have the idea, it's just out of ignorance, that a bowl of processed cereal is healthy. I wouldn't mind if you tell me I had a bowl of oatmeal, I have a bowl of barley, something like that. But a boxed cereal is not healthy. So think again, look at the label, see how much sugar added, how many grams. And by the way, be careful when you read the labels, because many times you see, oh, it has so many calories. That's good. Look at the top, and it says per serving. And it turns out that a serving might be a spoonful. Nobody has a spoonful. You take a whole bowl. So see how many grams of your cereal, how many calories that would be. What I want to say is that by discovering all this, we started entering in the world of lots of carbohydrates, very refined carbohydrates, very easily absorbable carbohydrates, and deprived, stripped from all its protective factors, like chromium, like fiber, like vitamins, like protein, like all of this. You never refine, for example, meats. You do not refine fats because they don't have that problem. Now, cereals do have all these factors, and I ask you, isn't that God's hand working on our behalf, saying, I'm going to create this grain, but I'm going to balance this carbohydrate with all this fiber, with all this chromium, with all these B vitamins, with all these things, so it can become a full, good food? But if I only take the part with which I'm going to make money and discard the other part, that's not an honest food. That's not a wholesome food. That's not a complete food. And I might be getting people sick. And that's what's happening. So not only you have to read the label, I would ask you not to read a label. If you're going to buy food, buy for honestly grown food. Food that comes from the field, food that comes from the farm, food that comes from the ocean. That doesn't have an information label. You don't have to read anything. When you take an apple, when you take a bunch of broccoli, when you take rice or whole wheat or any of these things, a spoonful of honey, there's not a label in it. Because it's just honest to God food. And that's what we should be eating. And that's going to begin our path to health and welfare. But if we continue to eat all these Frankenstein foods, we're going to be sick. So let's change all that. I'm going to take a few words about fiber, because fiber is in all carbohydrates. And fiber can do a lot of things. Fiber can create a bulk, so you don't eat that much. Fiber will increase the bulk of the intestinal content. So every time you have a BM, a lot of those calories go out even without coming into your body. Fiber can also block some of the absorption of huge amounts of carbohydrates. And fiber can help you in so many ways. There are studies that they have done with so many calories, but this group, we give them fiber. These one do not raise their sugar levels. So fiber is a God-sent remedy for carbohydrates. So you can see, you can actually eat what you like as long as you cook it from scratch, as long as you don't send it to a factory to be processed, where they're going to strip the good part of it, where they're going to mill it to the point that it is readily absorbable. Let's begin to understand all that, and we will begin to make the shift to better life and healthier life. We still have more to tell you. Stay with me, please. You are with Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez, Medical Director of BioCare Hospital. And I hope you have been following this podcast. And I hope you read the other ones that we have on the same subject. We're talking about what's happening with overweight and obesity. It's important to understand it, because if we begin to understand it, we start to understand how to solve the problem. Because I know for many of you, for me, for everybody, it's been many years of anguish and problem, because we have a problem that we try to solve one time, another time, and now we go to Atkins, and now we go to Mediterranean, and now we go to, and we never seem to find an answer. We start with the diet, it starts working all right, then we reach the dreaded plateau, and then we start gaining weight again. So what are we going to do? What is the way out? Am I really the culprit? I'm really the problem just because I eat too much and just because I don't have any physical activity? No, that's not true. We have been put in this condition because if you look around the world, in other countries, you might see people that are very different from us because they don't have access to processed food. They eat in a more natural way, in a more traditional way, some people say. If you go to Europe, simple. Europeans are very finicky about their foods. They're very choosy. They're very careful. But we're not. We just want to be filled. We just want to have, we call it comfort food, and this type of thing. And they have convinced us that the problem is a lot of calories. So we start cutting calories. And once again, it works for some time, but doesn't work because you're depriving your body from important things when you just lower calories. When you have low-fat food, you are in a problem. When you have low this, low the other. No, food has to be wholesome, complete. Because one thing happens. If you start eating less calories, your body starts using less calories. The end result, you do not lose weight. You might lose it in the beginning because you're still spending this amount of calories, but once the body starts saving, it's just a budget, you're giving me 1,500 calories instead of 3,000. Well, I'm going to make adjustments so I don't spend 3,000, I'm going to spend 1,500. And what happens in that process is that many times you damage one organ that you want to keep healthy for your whole life. And that's the muscle mass. Remember, I have said it. 2/3 of our body weight is muscle. And in the muscle mass, we have the real hard resources for health. When we get seriously ill, it is our muscle mass that puts up with the problem, really responds to the problem by producing everything the body needs to come out of it. And you have seen it in terminal patients with cancer or anything like that. They start losing their muscle. That means the body is really fighting. But why should we lose our muscle if we don't have any deadly disease? Just because we want to lose weight. And we do it by eating less. That's not the problem. It's not calories. It's what we eat. So keep your muscles, keep your health, keep your body. But this part of the message should be simple. Doctor, what can I do? What can I start doing today? Well, number one, you have to be involved. Your doctor is not going to do it. Your health department is not going to do it. The medical world is not going to do it. You have to be in charge. You have to be at the helm. And the first rule of thumb is no sugar added. Keep sugar out of your life. We don't need it. Dr. Bedan, you're used to it. Eat a little bit more of something else. Eat a little bit more of fat. Eat a little bit more of ham or bacon or beef, fish. eat some good protein that's going to improve the way you feel and how you function. The other one is educate yourself. If we do not educate ourselves, we don't learn about this, we're never going to come out of it. And there are literally hundreds of important blogs and information that you can read about. With all that information, with all that thing, you can start making a plan strategy. You can say, okay, now I understand how I'm going to be able to do it. And if I understand how I'm going to be able to do it, then I can start adding to it. You say, I need wholesome foods. I need to go to the market every day, or every other day, or I keep things fresh. Do you have any idea when the food you're buying in a large grocery department store has been in the shelves before you buy it? Do you know what's in it? No, you don't. So don't do it. Go to the farmer's market. Go to honest food producers, to responsible, ethical food producers, so you can say, this is what I'm eating, this is what I'm bringing to the table, this is what I'm giving my body. And this is the way my body is going to respond. And you're going to see in no time that you are going to feel a lot better. Don't be obsessed with weight. It'll come with those changes. If you start getting away with sugar, if you start making away with refined flour and carbohydrates, get rid of everything that's in a box, in a foil, in a can. Everything has to go. Eat more protein. Protein is good for you. Protein is good for your muscle. Protein will replenish a lot of the important health resources that we have in the body. The really important ones. Protein is going to be there for you. Something very important to gain is that if you have whole substances like cereals or legumes or veggies and that type of thing, you're going to add to your food a lot of fiber. You're going to add a lot of vitamins and minerals because they're not in carbs. Just a tiny little bit amount of B vitamin and so on with cereals. But that's if they're completely wholesome, which are very difficult to get. So if we start making all those simple changes, if we start making all this plan, if you watch some videos and some information, then we get it done. And once again, we're not counting calories. We don't want to lose weight. We want to be healthier. And you're going to see how everything starts to work. Just do it. Your cravings are going to gradually be resolved. Because the other big problem is when we don't eat sufficiently, cravings go up. And by sufficient, I mean nutritionally sufficient. If we eat garbage, if we eat fast food, that's not nutritionally filling. So we're hungry very fast. We need more food afterwards. You buy a cheap pizza, you're hungry in a little while. You have soda pop, you're hungry in a little while. Avoid sugary drinks. Stay away from them. You know that the amount of soda pop that we're taking today is probably 400% more than in 1970. And I'm talking per capita. I'm not saying just the full thing. And by the way, when you take a diet soda, it's just as bad. Because every time you put something sweet in your mouth, the brain releases insulin. And if insulin is the problem, well, you didn't get anything by that. You might not get the calories, but you get the insulin effect. And that's what you want to avoid. Plus, Remember that a lot of these artificial sweeteners that you have been come and gone stepped out not because they were not doing business. They had to step out because it was proven that some of them had cancer producing capacity. So you don't want to play with those odds. You don't need a bladder cancer. You don't need a stomach cancer. So stay away from them. Probably in 100 years we'll find something better. But in the meantime, what you want to do is you want to learn to eat better, to be good to yourself. And to do that, you need education and information. And here I am. I'm in all the social media. I have a website. I have a toll-free number. And I offer you a helping hand without any cost. If you have any question, you can contact me or any of the doctors of BioCare Hospital and ask a question. Give us a doubt. Tell us what you think of this, what you have available in your neighborhood. We're going to be very happy to advise you. We're going to be very happy to guide you. But first, I want to inspire you to begin shifting to a healthy path. Start changing the way you live. Because if you start doing that, weight is going to start going away. And your physical activity is going to go higher. You know what? Because you're eating better, and that will bring higher magnesium level, better mood, better intestinal flora, which is going to create a lot more of the brain hormones that give you well-being and optimism. That's right. Some of the most important brain substances to create well-being and mood are produced by the intestinal flora in the gut. And that will only happen if you provide enough fiber, enough vitamins, enough everything. So when I say feed your body, I mean your whole body. And in the process, you're going to start realizing that you look a lot better. Because health is beautiful. Till next time, I'm Dr. Rodrigo Rodriguez with BioCare Hospital.